We are starting the 13th chapter of Revelation, and we are now walking into the really murky waters of Revelation, because this is where now we begin to tackle some of the things that have brought a lot of controversies. But the beauty of Bible study, especially this kind that we are following, what we call exposition, is that you do not have the option of studying what you like. There are several approaches to studying the Bible, especially in a group setting, and by far expository becomes the most appropriate because it gives you no chance to skip the controversial, all the unpopular, all whatever you think, I wish this part was never in the Bible. So now that we are there, you can't jump that portion and say, let's go to the ones that we like. So here we go, Revelation chapter 13. And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his 10 horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. Now, you will recall that we ended the previous chapter with John taking us back in time to how Satan lost and became the dragon, the serpent, and all the names. Now, in this chapter, John begins a new series of visions that will now oscillate between that present time, because some of the things he will talk about were actually things that were happening, and also some of them were in the future. Remember, like I told you, from chapter 13, or rather from chapter 12, we begin to look deeper into the issues, some of them explaining the things he has highlighted, because he gave us a snapshot of events from that particular time to the day when he says the kingdoms of this world become the kingdoms of our Father. Now, this series from 13 to I think 18 centers on the things he saw that helps to explain some of the things happening at that time, and also give us now more details about the things that are to come in the future. And even as we go into this, I need you to bear at the back of your mind, because this becomes critical to any sober interpretation of the book of Revelation. 2 things, just as a way of introduction to now the next series of visions. 1, this message was originally, the whole book was originally written to a particular generation. And I'm saying that because just like, let me use this prophetic word which all of us are familiar with. Behold, a virgin shall bear a child. We know that from the Old Covenant or Old Testament. But if you go to where that scripture is taken from, of course, it was a message spoken by Isaiah to the Jewish people at a time when they were under threat, immediate threat from Assyria. And he told them actually, a virgin shall bear a child, Josiah by name, who shall, and the Bible begins to describe the things that child would do. When we quote that scripture in reference to the birth of Christ, we have no doubt that that is a prophetic word. But you realize the original message was to a certain generation, and the meaning for them is quite different from the meaning to us. For them, a virgin shall bear a child, it was the wife of someone they knew, and it was not by the power of the Holy Spirit. Of course, Josiah was not a product of the Holy Ghost. It was a product of a man and a woman. But that message has some, what we call futuristic implications concerning now Jesus Christ and events in the New Testament. I'm saying this because part of us understanding any prophetic message, leave alone revelation, is to understand that that message was originally meant for a specific generation. And if you don't understand what it meant in the immediate, then you are likely to miss what it meant even in the future. And that's why I quoted a scripture like that one, so that you see, if you were to go to the people of the days of Hezekiah who received that prophecy, and you begin to tell them about John the Baptist coming before Jesus, and you begin to tell them about Mary getting pregnant by the Holy Ghost, you would probably be stoned to death. And they would be right, because you would be telling them things that do not really matter to them. They needed immediate assurance that God is with them. In the same way, if you read the book of Revelation without that at the back of your mind, it's like you are saying, because you remember we started by to the churches in Asia. It's like you are saying John was wasting his time. I mean, these guys, he had nothing to speak to that generation. So every single message in this book should first bear meaning and, have some meaning to those 7 churches, as we saw. And then, where necessary, because not all things spoken by John have 2 applications, like now the words in the Old Testament. It must have a bearing for them and then for the things in the future. When you look at it that way, then this book will begin to make sense. The second thing about these next sessions is this book falls under what we call apocalyptic literature, and every apocalyptic literature will make use of symbolic names, symbols, and things like that. I think I mentioned that at the beginning of this book. So that not everything should be taken at face value. The book of Revelation is not the first, neither is it the last apocalyptic writing. Several have been written, and most of them will use coded language, even when they are speaking about something that is obvious, mostly for security reasons, because they would not want the message to get into the wrong hands. So when you understand that, you will also read that with that desire. Then for me to understand this, I need to understand the code that these guys were using. It's like if you intercept communication between 2 people who are deliberately using hidden meanings, you can end up getting the wrong impression. Like, I know you have seen this one being used repeatedly as a joke. Like this guy who the phone at home rang, he went to pick and he said hello, and on the other side there is a man asking how is the weather? Only later to realize the wife is having an affair, and the guy was calling to know whether the weather is okay. But you see now, because the guy doesn't know the code, he doesn't get what they are discussing him right there, and he doesn't even get it. So anyway, let's now get to this chapter. He sees a beast rising out of the sea. Generally speaking, in apocalyptic writings, the sea simplifies or rather signifies the world at large, a multitude like the sea, So he is talking about a beast which, and I will take you to several, or rather I will quote several places to help us understand. You remember in the book of Daniel that he saw the rise of what the angel told him are empires. He showed him the lion, the he-goat. You remember that? And then he saw the beasts, and then the angel was telling him these are the different empires that will rise upon the earth. Most of the time, beasts in apocalyptic writing is used to denote empire or we talk about the leader, the emperor, the king, and that empire that he will be leading, or that kingdom. So John sees now, out of the nations of the earth, a beast, or if you like, an empire, a kingdom rising among the nations. And the description is, these are 7 heads and 10 horns. Remember what we saw about the dragon? And I want you also to notice, he's not calling it a dragon, because we already saw the dragon is Satan, and John does not want to confuse his readers. So this is not the dragon that we saw, but it is something that looks as some features of that dragon, but this time round, it's a beast. It's something, if you were to classify the food chain, this would be somewhat lower than the dragon, but he has 10 horns, which speaks about powers. We saw that, and 7 heads, speaking about that kind of confusion, and 10 crowns. And then upon his name, upon his heads, the name of blasphemy. Now, this empire, or this emperor, because we are now dwelling with the head, who was the head of blasphemy, in this particular case, John was speaking about the rise of the Roman Empire, because at this particular time, it was the one that had risen out from among the nations. And the particular head he was talking about is this guy who had succeeded, because John wrote this book towards the end of the first, century. And we are talking about the reign of this guy called Domitian, Emperor Domitian, who considered himself to be, actually he referred to himself as the supreme Lord and God. So when John says his head has the name of blasphemy, the audience that he's writing to, they knew what he was talking about. Domitian called himself supreme Lord and God. And this guy, this now Domitian guy, who is now the head of this empire that rises from the sea, he had, although let me go to verse 2 so that I can connect that. But before we read verse 2, all Roman emperors were considered to be gods. That's why when we say on the heads there was blasphemy, it is not only, in association with the Domitian. Every emperor was considered a god. And that's why, and I'll show you that later, the months that depicted them, they had, because that month was dedicated to the worship of that emperor. And because of that selfish nature, they would add days. Ama hujaelewa kwa nini some months have 28, others 31, others 30. It depends on how selfish the emperor was, the one who is being worshipped. July was for Julius Caesar. That's why it has 31. Many of the months, it depended on how the emperor feels, because that whole month you were supposed to worship Julius Caesar. You go to Augustus Caesar, and so on and so forth. But now Domitian went a step further, and not only now considered himself a god among gods, he considered himself the supreme Lord and God, meaning he is even God over the other emperors who came before him. Now, verse 2, and the beast that I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. I want you to listen to the several things raised here. The description of the beast is this. It looked like a leopard in general, but the feet were the feet of a bear, which is another animal altogether, and the mouth of a lion. When we talk about a leopard in the natural sense, we speak about this animal that you will rarely see. It will ambush its victims. It will come out of nowhere. It's known for its stealth ability. That was a fitting description, especially of Domitian. He did not have a military background like the rest of them. The others got to the throne through fighting, through proving their worth in the battlefield. Domitian had no military background, and how he got to the throne baffled many. It was like the way a leopard, you'll just, the other animals, the lion and the cheetah, the hyena, all the others, they will make a lot of noise. They will chase down their prey. The leopard will just fall out of nowhere. Domitian rose to the throne even when no one knew him, as such. He was a non-entity until he found his way up there. The bear, the feet of a bear, speak about that. We talk about, where is that? The strength. The bear is known to be one of the strongest animals, especially when it stands on its feet. Now, Emperor Domitian, using ruthless means, managed to subdue the whole Roman Empire from Rome to Egypt to Syria, everywhere, using sheer might. He used very strong generals, and it was like the strength of a bear. Of course, the mouth of a lion, you don't need a lot there. The majestic voice of the lion, that anytime the lion, roars in the forest, every other animal takes cover. Domitian was famed even for his famous edicts and big words that he kept on uttering that used to scare his opponents. By the way, you can check some of these even from the night running. You can go online. You realize he went to an extent of one time sending his own wife into exile for very flimsy excuses. And in the first place, how he got married to that lady, he forced the husband to divorce her. She was married to a senator. He forced the husband to divorce her so that he can get married to her. So now you understand why he had the mouth of a lion. Someone who can tell you divorce your wife without reason and you do that, he must have the mouth of a lion. Anyway, John is describing what he is seeing coming out of the sea. And then, very interesting, you remember the dragon that we had already seen in chapter 12. The dragon gave him, that emperor, his power, his throne, and his great authority. It is not the dragon, it is not Satan literally reigning on earth, but he has raised someone, given him power, throne, and authority, such that this person seems to have, if you like, supernatural ability. And that's one of the descriptions given about Domitian. He was feared by everyone because he seems to be above harm. People feared because several people tried to plan to assassinate him, but one of them somehow, they would go and reveal the information, and of course Domitian would have these guys killed. And he is the first emperor, now Roman emperor. You remember Rome was governed by the Senate. The emperor was more or less a ceremonial figure, but not with Domitian. When he came to the throne, he changed the law. He made the Senate obsolete, and they took over the running of the empire without the input of the senators who, from the previous administrations, they were actually the guys running. They were their devisers, they were the policy makers, but Domitian did away with them. And he went to the extent of making such, if you like, seditious statements that the Christians of that day began to refer to him as the devil incarnate. He seemed like the same way we talk about Jesus, as God incarnate in the flesh. They began to refer to Domitian as now Satan, incarnate because he made statements, he did things. He's the guy who changed 2 months of the Roman calendar, September and October, to be months to worship him. All the other emperors had 1 month, 1 month, 1 month each. This guy has 2, September and October, where he's the one who changed. He renamed them so that now he can be worshipped for 2 months instead of 1 month. In short, he was so ruthless and so vile that the Christians of his day began to look at him as the devil incarnate. Now, verse 3. And I saw one of his heads as if it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world marveled after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon who gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? There was a common myth during the reign of Domitian that was known as the Nero, it's a very hard name there, Redivivus myth. And those of you who remember the attributes of this other character called Nero, who reigned all the way to AD 64, 67. It's not very clear. Nero is the one who burnt Rome, and they blamed it on the Christians and then went ahead to kill them. But when he died, when he committed suicide, assisted by one of his bodyguards and the 2 nurses, they took the body and they buried it and refused to allow anyone to plant anything on top of the grave. And then they claimed that Nero, before he died, said that he's going to resurrect just like Jesus Christ. And then he said they began to propagate that theory that when he returns, because he's going to return, he's going to punish all the people who conspired against him. That myth was so much believed that even the armies from Rome at that particular time who were attacking Europe, the guys from Europe were scared because when they are trying to fight the Romans, they would hear, remember, Nero is coming. The one who died, he is resurrecting and he is coming with such wrath that you guys will not believe it. And between Nero and this guy, Domitian, there are 4 emperors. Most of them would rule for 2 days and then they would be killed. And people began to believe it all the more that anyone who tries to sit in the seat of Nero, they are going to get killed. They are going to get it. So when Domitian came and he didn't die, then they began to say, now this is Nero reincarnated. And they began now to fear him even the more because he seemed like he's not a normal human being according to them. Now, when you listen to this description, John says this. I'm telling you these things from now the mythology of the day so that you can now begin to understand why some of these things, the language used. John saw one of the heads, because remember the beast is about the whole Roman Empire. One of the heads, as it were, was wounded to death. But then the wound was healed and everyone began to marvel. And that's part of the reason why this guy, Domitian, carried such an aura of myth around him, because people began to think 4 emperors tried to sit on the throne of Nero and they died. And by the way, these are things, this is not in the Bible. You can check in world history. This guy ruled for, 15 years, which was unusual. All the other emperors, 15 or even 25? I don't even remember the time. All the other emperors ruled for less. They would be either killed, they would be deposed. He is the second one after Tiberius, because Tiberius is the longest serving Roman emperor. And this guy was the second longest serving. And because of those issues, people began to marvel that this guy really, this is Nero, come back to life. And that's why now he says, all the world marveled after the beast. But then they worshipped not the beast, but who? The dragon who gave the beast power. There was that myth that this guy is from the gods. Of course, to the world, to the Roman Empire, the citizens, they believed in gods living among men. You remember them trying to worship Paul, because they believed gods sometimes live among men. And that's why now, for them to believe the dragon, of course, John is speaking from the side of the spirit, knowing the dragon is Satan, but to the citizens, they believed this is a guy sent from the dead by the gods. So they marveled at him and then worshipped the dragon, the power, the god that had sent Nero back in the name of Domitian. And they kept on saying who is like the beast, now the Domitian, and who is able to make war with him. They say part of the reasons why this guy survived for so long is people believed that myth so much that some nations would simply refuse to go to war with any army sent by Domitian, because they believed he was not a normal human being. Now, and there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. I don't want to belabor that. I've told you Domitian became, later in life, he became paranoid, and he issued too many edicts, some of them against the Roman Senate, and then he called himself absolute ruler in terms of political power, so that you don't have to listen to any other power. Then in religious aspects, he called himself the supreme Lord and God. Exactly what now the Bible here is talking about. There was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. And power was given unto him to continue, remember the 42 months, which is 3.5, indefinite. At the prime of his rule, when now he considered himself immune to any kind of assassination and things like that, he was assassinated. Actually, he was killed by one of his guys, and then, it was so abrupt. His reign came to an abrupt end. That's why now we are still talking about the 42 months. I told you 3.5 speaks about that indefinite period. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And power was given him over all tribes and tongues and nations. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. If any man has an ear, let him hear. Now, Domitian, being the last of that dynasty of powerful Roman emperors, reigned over a huge section of land, ranging from Rome itself to parts of Europe, then the whole of Middle East, Syria, Israel, then all the way to Egypt. That's why now I'm trying to dispense with some of the things spoken here. Power was given him over all tribes, tongues, nations. He reigned over what was known as the known world of that day. Then the Bible here says, he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God. I've already talked about that. He called himself Supreme Lord and God, thereby demanding all people to worship him, because if he is the Supreme Lord and God, then he is the one to be worshipped. Domitian, when it comes to persecution of Christians, he only actually is the one who ranks number one. He was worse than Nero. Nero started the persecution of Christians, but it is Domitian who took it to the next level. He persecuted and killed so many that at the end of the day, when you look at the history of all the martyrs of the church, it is under the reign of Nero where you find the most atrocious I mean, even in terms of how they were killed. Nero, when he blamed the Christians for setting Rome on fire, began to kill them ruthlessly, using them as human torches. I mean, at night, when he was holding his parties, he would light them up. They would be burning. That would be the light providing, they would be the torches providing light for his party. When Domitian took over, he continued with that rage, but took it to the next level. Many of the Christian martyrs that you read about in history were actually killed under the reign of Domitian. And here, according to John, he had been given power to make war with the saints and to overcome, of course, for a season. And that's why many of them were killed under his rule, because according now to John, and I have told you this again and again, every time you are looking at events on earth, you need to look at what is happening in the spirit. In the spirit, John saw this guy was killing the Christians so much because power had been granted him to make war and overcome for a specific time. And that's why now he was able to do that. Now, all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him. Those who followed Domitian, those who paid homage to him, according to this statement, are those whose names were not written in the Lamb's book of life. And the Bible here says that Lamb was slain before the foundation of the world. Of course, although I'll come to this later, like I hinted when we started this, every message written here has the immediate connotation and then the futuristic. So, yes, there are aspects of these that may find themselves recurring in the future, but at this particular moment, this beast that John was talking about, he was specifically talking about Domitian, because everyone in Rome, under the Roman Empire, needed to worship him, and if you did not, you were killed. But the Christians, whose now, the Bible here says, names are written in the Lamb's book of life, because we shall come back to that in greater details later. Let me not go to that. But it's noteworthy here to realize that according to John, Jesus was slain from the foundation of the world. The plan to save humanity did not begin after Adam fell. The Lord, when he set out to create man, he knew, and that should explain some of the statements like in the book of Deuteronomy where Moses tells the people, the Lord told Israel, I decided to walk with you, although I knew you were rebellious, I knew you would never follow me, I just decided I will follow you. Or rather, I will walk with you. I knew you are hard of heart. Long before Adam sinned, God had a plan B, because before he set out to create man, he knew he is creating a creature that has the capability to disobey. The other creatures, the animals, even when we deal with them, they don't have a mind of their own. That's why you tie a cow to a tree for 1 week, you can very easily remove the rope and the cow will still go back to the same tree and stand there. It believes it's tied. You try a human being. To program someone to become your slave like that, it will take a lot of time. And even after that, you still know at the back of your mind, one day they may see the light. God knew that. And that's why sometimes when you don't understand what we call free will, then you will not understand the issue of sin, because God knew I am not looking for a robot. Otherwise, he would have just programmed Adam to say, sir, yes, sir. But he needed someone who can worship him willingly. And that meant giving him the freedom to also not worship you, if we can put it that way. That's why man has free will. God is not looking for slaves. Otherwise, what is so hard in, striking you with lightning and making you a zombie so that you worship him anyway. But he wants you to willingly. So that you see, I can choose to worship God, or I can say no to you and I choose to worship Satan, or even choose to worship myself. So God knew there is that possibility. So he knew, because I know there is that possibility, let me put in place a remedial plan. And that's why the Bible here says, the lamb was slain before the foundation of the world. In the mind of God, he knew, I am creating this creature capable of will, self-will. If this creature decides to follow me, well and good. If he chooses to exercise the will I have given him and goes the wrong way, let me have a plan B. Let me have a plan to save him in case he falls. Because remember, the creation of man was after the creation of the heavenly realm, and he had already seen what happened with Satan and his followers. So he knew these guys I'm creating, they carry the same potential. So this lamb was slain before the foundation of the world. But then in reality, Jesus was slain in this world 2,000 years ago. That should now be clear to you. And that's why sometimes when we say God knows the end from the beginning, he knew this guy can sin, so let me put in place plan B in case he doesn't obey me. And that's why Jesus is depicted to have been slain in the mind of God long before Adam fell into sin. Verse 10, he that leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He that kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. This is a statement by John. In the midst of the vision, he pauses to say what now in a play you would call aside. He is now speaking things that more or less have got nothing to do with the vision he is seeing. But he's giving this declaration, which we know to be true anyway throughout many generations, that whether we are talking about you beast, the beast of Rome now, any nation that leads others into captivity, one day will be subjected to the same captivity. So he's giving out this warning that, by the way, do not forget that whatever you are doing as a nation, the tables will be turned, and the same will happen to you, which is what we keep on saying. Whatever a man sows, the same we shall reap. So you lead others into captivity, you will be led into captivity one day. You kill with the sword, one day you will be killed with the sword. And specifically to the Christians, or rather false brethren who were giving up their brothers because Domitian began to hunt them down, then he is also telling them, that's why he's saying, here is the patience and faith of the saints. You are betraying your brothers, you will expect in the future to be betrayed by others. Maybe not because of your Christianity, but because of other things, because Domitian began to sustain his lifestyle. He began to take the wealth of the people. Apart from the taxes, he looks at a wealthy person, he cooks up, charges against them, gets them killed, and then takes over their property. So this was a warning also to the false brothers who were betraying the church, that if you lead others to captivity, expect the same. Verse 11, and I beheld another beast. I need you to understand, or rather to recognize the word here is talking of another, not now the one we have talked about, coming out of the earth. And he had two horns like a lamb, and spoke as a dragon. This other beast, the first one came out of the sea. This one is coming up out of the earth. There may or may not be a significance of why the first one is coming out of the sea and the other one coming out of the earth. But the important thing to realize is this. Different from the other beast we saw, who was looking ferocious, a leopard with the mouth of a lion. This one looks very innocent. It looks like a lamb, but it speaks as what? Not like a dragon, but it speaks as a dragon. This beast that he saw coming up now has been interpreted by many now in the church circles to mean this will be a rebirth of something similar to the Roman Empire. I mean, a world power that will dominate the entire world. But this time round, it will come with a lot of, it will be hidden. It will not be like the leopard, the lion. It will look innocent on the outside, but then it will be speaking with the voice of a dragon. It will not be a beast, in quotes, like the other beast we have encountered. And I'll come back to that later as we look at more at this. But for many people, now this speaks about now the rebirth, because this is another beast coming after the other one that has come out of the sea. This is a second one, and the description given, let me go to verse 12 so that you connect. He exercises all, underline the word all, the power of the first beast before him, and causes the earth and them who dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Now, the first beast, many people are in agreement, was the Roman Empire. Now, if this second beast will exercise all the power of the first beast, then the conclusion is this new entity will bear some semblance of, if I may use this loosely, political power. That is wielding some political power like Rome used to wield in those days, where they were the one controlling the economy, the what we call the socio-economic dynamics of the day, the infrastructure, everything was under the control of Rome. That's why you still have that saying up to this day, all roads lead to Rome, because Rome was the last world civilization and worldwide civilization and empire. So this new beast will exercise all the power of that beast, but he will now draw attention of every person on earth to the first beast, meaning he will begin to revive interest in seeing how that first beast, the Roman Empire, worked. And if you just look at that casually, you don't miss the fact that of late you have seen a lot of interest in people coming together in economic zones, and all this is wired and tailored after what the Roman Empire, how the Roman Empire used to run their things. Let me not belabor there, because we still have much description about that. But notice the deadly wound was healed. Before I leave this statement, remember we talked about the beast, the head being healed, wounded mortally, and then somehow coming back to life. Now, and I said about the immediate application and the futuristic. Now, if you look at, from a historical point of view, if you look at the disintegration of the Roman Empire, that looked like, that even today looks like a mortal wound. No one in their right senses would believe that the Roman Empire can be revived. It's gone. I mean, at this moment, we are not talking of even the current world empires, both military speaking, economic, and all the other aspects. Rome does not feature anywhere. I mean, Italy, or if you like, Europe. We are talking about China. We are talking about US. Both of those powers are nowhere near now what you would, if you like, call the Eurozone. But if this wound, now speaking the language of John, if that wound becomes healed and the Roman Empire is revived, then you understand why whoever would be responsible for that revival would cause all people who dwell on earth to worship that, because that would be an economic miracle. To make, call it Rome, call it Eurozone, to make them a superpower, to make them overtake China, overtake US, overtake all these other emerging forces on earth, and to make them now the sole voice, then that really would inspire a lot of respect from the dwellers, like the Bible calls them, the dwellers on earth. By the way, if you look at the book of Revelation, from even when we talk about now logical thinking, you realize some of the things John talks about. It's very easy. By the way, people keep on saying, how, after all these things that are written here, how would now the Antichrist and things like that, how would such people come and succeed on earth? Because it's like we know, we have the information. But you just look at the scenario created and you would understand why. Remember what Daniel said, that there is a prince who would come and he would make peace. Anyone today who would make Palestine and Israel agree politically, I tell you the truth, every award on earth would be given to that man. Anyone who would bring peace between Palestine and Israel today, just like Daniel said, that man would be awarded by the Nobel, by every single organization on earth. Even the church would recognize him. Seriously speaking. So when Daniel says that the prince will come and make peace and then deceive many and then later change and then begin to kill, you need to understand, if someone really made peace with Israel, we would pay homage to him. Even the church, because we keep on saying we are pro-Israel. I mean, someone would eliminate the enemy of Israel. To the Christian, that would be a god. To the Muslim, that would still be a god. And you would understand why everyone would now begin to say this is a man. So that's why this new power will very easily command the worship of every person. But then we go to more description of him. And he does great wonders, verse 13, so that he makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and it deceives them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles. I want you to underline that. He deceives them by the means of those miracles, which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast that had the wound by a sword and did live. Do you remember the two horns of the beast that looks like a lamb? It seems to be horns throughout scripture signify power. The horns, like David says, he has given me horns. I push against my enemies. Now, this beast seems to have two centers of power. One of them is, the Bible has just said, he will have the authority of the first beast, the Roman Empire. They had political, military, if you like, power. Now, this new beast will not only have that, he will have power to do miracles. Now, that speaks on the other hand of some sort of religious power. So you have now this new beast, this new world power, coming up with a hidden motive, not ferocious like the leopard, but this time round, he has a political might on one hand, but he can also exercise religious, if you like, spiritual power, because he does great wonders, making fire come down from heaven. And that's why now, even all commentators are in agreement that the last empire, if you like, to rise on this earth will rise more or less from a religious perspective more than military and things like that. So when you begin to hear nations becoming focal in terms of what they worship, or let me give you an example, just that one that can show you what John is describing. Those of you who remember the late Ayatollah Khomeini, I don't know whether some of you were still following history when Ayatollah was the talk of town. We were in high school. And I remember even my desk mate changed his name and began to call himself Ayatollah Khomeini. Because the guy was a hero. The guy who brought the Iranian revolution. This is a religious leader. It is a sheikh or whatever they call them. And he spoke to the people and convinced them to overthrow a democratically elected government. He convinced the people to defy the military powers of the day and rallied them under his rule. And that's why up to this day, Iran is not under this madman who is elected by the people. The supreme leader of Iran is still the Ayatollah. There is a new one, I don't remember his name. I think it is Ali. Ayatollah Ali. The guy running Iran is not the the robot elected by the people. It is the religious leader, the Ayatollah, who is considered a prophet. He holds the mind of the people through religious power. And the same is true in many of the places where, when we talk about terrorism, we are talking of people who are under the grip of one person who convinces them from a religious perspective that I am your leader, you need to listen to me, and they will blow themselves up. This new beast that John saw coming up, it has the power to do wonders. So we are talking of a combination of both the political will, military might, and then on the other hand, false miracles. And that's why, especially in these days, when we begin to talk about people, false prophets, and we shall come now to another stage where John introduces now the beast and the false prophet. When we begin to see people who are doing all kinds of crazy stuff, it should not shake your faith. Actually, Jesus himself said that in these last days will be punctuated by people who can call fire down from heaven. And he said, beware, do not be deceived by such. And Jesus said it very clearly, but we are living at a time when people would rather follow miracles, even when they are dubious, rather than follow what the word of God says. When you hear people being told to eat grass, do not be surprised. When you hear people now, I hear there are people walking on air to prove they are men of God, and people are there clapping for them. Do not be surprised, because that is exactly what Jesus predicted, and that is part and parcel of the rise of this new beast or new empire, if you like. And the last thing I want you to see, he will convince the people on earth to make an image to the beast. He will want to draw people back to history and begin to show them how the Roman Empire was good. I'm saying this because there is a current trend everywhere, whether on TV or in whatever circles, of people trying to convince us how the good old days were better. You see, he will convince the people to raise an image to the old beast that died and lived again. So when you hear these stories of forget about Christianity, let's go back to our roots, it is a spirit that is at work, trying to bring people to that point where they make an image of the past and begin to worship it, to begin to try to convince people that was better. We can go back to that way. We can discard this new thing called Christianity and things like that. Now, verse 15, he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. The false miracles that are being done, whether those miracles be spiritual, be even in terms of the economic turnaround, the idea is to show that this new regime has power to give life. And I want you to notice the first beast in verse 15 now is still dead. But this new beast has the power to give it what? Life. And give it a voice. So we are talking about this new beast purporting to bring to life what died actually. And that's why even many commentators agree on whatever power will try to arise on the ashes of the old Roman Empire will try to depict that that system worked better and things like that. But in reality, it is something that is being given life from somewhere else and being given a voice by something new that is purporting to be what actually, like the Bible here says, what was killed. And then he says, as many as will not worship that image, he will cause them to be killed. Domitian did it once. According to this new beast that John saw coming up, there will also be a repeat of the same. And that's why you are seeing even now an escalation when it comes to what we call the persecution of the church. in our day, because those who disagree, those who will not want to toe the line of certain belief systems, certain images that are being set up, they are labeled as enemies and killed, and that's why the persecution of the church is increasing day by day. And he causes, verse 16, all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, that no man might might buy or sell, except that he had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Now, the first statement, I don't think we need to labor much. The description, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, it just is talking about all the parameters that you would use to describe the entire populace. If you are not small, you are great. If you are not rich, you are poor. If you are not free, you are a slave. So it's just a soft way of telling you everyone will be forced, or rather, let's use the word cause. He causes, because I will come to that. Now, the mark that he's talking about on the forehead or the right hand, at the particular time when John is writing, it was common for every slave to be marked with the name of their owner, so that even if you ran away, wherever you went, we would know you belong to so and so, and we would capture you and take you back. Soldiers also had a tattoo on their arm with the name of their general, and also the mark of the emperor. Every emperor had a mark, like what now, even in modern times, with every change of regime, there is what is called the presidential standard. What Kibaki had is not what Uhuru had, and is not what Moi had. So the Roman soldiers would receive the name, they would have the name of their general tattooed on them as a mark of loyalty, and then they would also have the mark of the emperor, so that even when they are fighting, they can tell you, we are fighting because we are loyal to this. Maybe you have never understood why, especially because Kenya is British. All the talk about, especially the Navy. The British, you realize every vessel, before you come to the name of the vessel, you will see the initials OHMS. How many of you know what it means? There'll be OHMS, then Lincoln, OHMS Churchill, on Her Majesty's service. It's a declaration that this ship, wherever you see it, is on a mission. And that mission is to protect the whatever interest of Her Majesty the Queen. That's why now you'll see OHMS, on Her Majesty's service. Then you hear them talking about the Royal Navy. It's about defending the interests of a certain office. So this is not something that John picked from nowhere. It was common, and it is still there. You pledge allegiance to the power that has enlisted you. So that mark was something common in that day. So when John says, this new ruler, this new new ruler will cause people to bear that mark, the issue was not actually about the mark. It was what the mark will be about, because people were used to that mark. You remember even Paul coming to a point and saying, let no man bother me, because I bear on me the mark of Christ. He was not saying he had a cross somewhere as a tattoo. He was just saying, if you look at me spiritually, I am a slave who belongs to another place. Now, these are the verses now where everyone now begins to have their own kind of weird interpretation. But before we go to all these weird things, let us look at the common things that actually should make you be concerned. Number one, this mark will be both voluntarily, that is why some will get it on the forehead, and others it will be by force on the right hand. Those who are not afraid to display the mark, display it on the head. I am declaring for all to know I belong to Caesar. Those who have been forced will want to keep it hidden so that they can flash it when and if they need it, when they want to do business. The second thing, I want to give you a number of things. It is about worship, because the mark actually is to distinguish those who worship the beast and those who refuse to worship the beast. Remember, he will cause those who worship the beast to have that mark. If you don't have that mark, it means you don't worship the beast and you are excluded. Number 3, and this is where now it becomes interesting. There is a choice of either a mark, a name, or a number. But look at where Christians concentrate all their efforts. The number. They ignore the other two. There is a mark, and there is what? There is a name. And actually it's very clear. He will cause all to receive either a mark, or a name, or a number. So why would we concentrate all our energy on just the number? Why are we not following the name or the mark? Why do we just want the number? Of course, it's because at the end of the day, we already have our own ideas. I know you have heard of all these weird interpretations. I've even read commentaries, big volumes that say this is about the Pope and this cross that they mark during baptism on a Catholic on the face, then that is the mark of the beast. Then the question is, how would you use the cross of Jesus Christ and now say that is the mark of the beast? You realize it doesn't add water. There are those who said Henry Kissinger, because he became a powerful, by the way, what was he in the US government? Whatever, foreign secretary or something, because he rose to great heights and people believed he was the Antichrist and he was the little horn of Daniel. Then rose Hitler, and they realized, I think, that horn fits more than this other one. So they went and described Hitler as the Antichrist and the little horn. And you remember he used to brand Jews, with that mark. And people concluded this is the guy. Then Hitler died and he's like, we are still here. So at the end of the day, you'd rather concentrate more on the implications rather than trying to go to things that John does not bother to explain. And before I forget, number 4, just like it was during the time of Domitian, where it became impossible for Christians to do business without denouncing Christ, so John is saying the same will be. It happened during the reign of Domitian, so there's nothing new about it. And John is saying if the new beast arises, then that is exactly the same method, the same ruthlessness that he will come with. Let me go to verse 18 so that we can tie this up. Here is wisdom. Let him that has understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Of course, we already looked at that when we were looking at the significance of numbers, that 7 is the number of completeness, perfect God. 6 is just minus 1, and he falls short. So whoever is trying to call himself God, Supreme Lord and God, he still falls short. Then, now more closely to the people of the day, the Jewish system, the Hebrew language rather, they used to have a numerical equivalent of every letter. And the lettering 666 corresponds to, in Hebrew, to the numerical value of Neron Caesar when it's written in Hebrew. So John knew what he was talking about at that particular moment. He was talking about Domitian, but even if the letter landed in the hands of Domitian, he would never know they were talking about him. That's why I told you, you need to understand the significance to the immediate people before you now bring in other connotations. But even if we now see the fulfillment of this, both in the immediate talking about Domitian, and then we see in the future the rise of someone of similar blasphemy, calling himself God and things like that. And like Paul says, this is the character we call the Antichrist. The spirit of the Antichrist is already in the world, and he will appear. And that's why now all commentators are in agreement that this portion now talking about that beast, new beast, talks about a character who will arise with both political power and religious power, because on one hand he bears the rule and authority of the first beast, which is the political Roman power, and then he also has the power to do miracles, which speaks about the religious aspect. But when you look at it in the bigger picture, you realize John is talking about the rise of one empire, worldwide empire, and a recognized leader who will command the respect of everybody and then begin to impose certain things on every person. And those who want to go against him will suffer certain consequences, not least, like what he's saying, inability to do business. Now, that is not hard to picture in our day, because, like people have said, the infrastructure for what John and Paul talked about is in place. I mean, when we talk about the microchip today, it's everywhere. Now the passport has a microchip, your ATM card has a microchip. With the time, everything will have to be digital. So now for this to work, at least you can see the infrastructure is already in place. That every person must be able to identify themselves using whatever. Now he's talking about a mark as something that is readable. And there is even a trial right now in the army because of the current use of bombs that decapitate people, and they are unable to place them where they were killed, where they are implanting the people in the front line with a microchip, either at the back of the neck, so that they can signal, they can know exactly where you are or where your parts are. That is the infrastructure. But what I want you to notice is this. When it talks about the mark, the name, the number, it speaks about people willingly worshipping the Antichrist or the beast. Paul calls him the Antichrist. All people being forced. At the end of the day, what you need to notice is the fact that it will be tied to how willing people are to conform, or rather to enjoy the comfort. And when the Bible begins to talk about now the comforts of this world, that's why now that is what should bother the Christian more, because those who are busy shouting about the number of the beast, even Huduma number being the number of the beast, they forget they already have the ID number. So if it was just a number, already you can't do anything. You can't open a bank account. You can't get a driver's license. You can't get a passport. You can't register for a course without an ID number. So if you say the Huduma number is the number of the beast, you already have one. It may show you that the infrastructure is there, but I want you to see at the end of the day, it will be about worship. Are you ready, for instance, to say, if it will cost me my faith, then I would rather not do business? Are you seeing why it says you'll be unable to buy or sell? We are concentrating so much on 666, but how many believers today would rather bribe than lose a contract? Already, you are unable to survive without trade in this world. So that is what should bother you more than just how the number will be when the Antichrist will come. Will we be on earth? And by the way, those who say the church will be raptured, that is shooting yourself in the foot, because if we are talking about the Antichrist, you cannot have the anti if the Christ is not here. Get me? If the church is gone, then who are you opposing now? The anti is in the place, in opposition, against. If the church is gone, Christ is gone. So whoever remains does not have to be forced. Already they are now part of the system. So if we are talking of people being caused, then you must understand Christ will be on earth. You wouldn't have the Antichrist if the Christ is not there. So it's about you understanding. If, instead of you following to know what the number is, how prepared are you to stand by your faith? So that even if you are told you will not do business without this and this, you can still say, I would rather live without that business. But we have people busy saying the Antichrist is the Pope, is Obama, is who has not been called the Antichrist. But the same people would not survive, if they are told you will not buy, you will not sell, unless you denounce your faith. You don't have to say, I denounce Christ. By your actions, the moment you begin to go certain ways, you are already giving in. That's why what should bother you more is, how ready am I to defend my faith? How ready am I to live without the benefits of this world, if need be? But we have people, I would rather bribe to get a job. And what's the difference between the one who will be told, weka mark hapa, ama hatutakupea kazi? What's the difference between that person and you? Because you need to bring it to your time also, before you say, well, because the consolation of many people is, by the time the Antichrist comes, I will be dead. Well, the principle that God uses to judge the world is the same from the days of Adam to now. If people died for their faith, even now he's expecting us to die. That's why Paul says we are killed every day. When you are confronted by a choice, denounce your faith and compromise, or stand by your faith and lose certain, what do you call them, amenities, you are faced with the same decision. So instead of following to know the number, actually you have options. You can receive the mark, the name, or the number. I don't know why people choose to follow the number more, because there are other two options. But whatever that will be, I need you to realize the danger is when you are faced with the reality, like Domitian did. You would not do any business if you were a Christian. You would try to establish anything, you would be told to pay homage to Domitian. If you refuse, you wouldn't do any business. Actually, you would be known you are a Christian and you would be killed. It happened once, it's going to happen again, according to John, according to Jesus himself, because he said you'll be killed for my sake, according to Paul the same. So the issue should not actually be who the Antichrist is, but how prepared am I to survive in a world where if I don't bow to this, I will not be allowed certain privileges. And that is why it calls upon you and me to begin to learn how to live in this world without being a part of the world. Because if you cannot sacrifice certain privileges to stand with your faith, don't begin to say, ati Antichrist atakuja, mimi siwezi kubali kuwekwa namba hapa. It's not even about that. It's about your ability to say no to that beast. Forget about even the number. Stand on your feet. You realize this book has a lot that applies to us as of now, rather than where we try to put it in the remote future, where we believe. By the way, this has been called by many as the Escapist Generation. The reason why we desire things about the rapture and all that is because we want to escape reality. You don't see Kina Paul praying for rapture. They were ready to drink the cup. If we are going to the same heaven with them, then I don't see why we should now be so much geared to being raptured. Before the Antichrist comes, I want to be away. It's because you don't want to be told you can't do business and be a Christian. We are too soft, right? Or like people keep on saying that we'll be raptured tukiwa kwa matatu, nitaenda bila kulipa. It's poverty mentality. Why should I go with anyone's debt? Nilipe tu niende bila madeni. It's about us escaping the hard part of life. And it's not good. Father, in Jesus' name, may you enable each one of us to be resolute, whatever the future holds, that we shall not bear the mark, the number, the name of any other, But we, like Paul, will say we bear the mark of Christ. And our worship will always be to you. Our allegiance will always be to you and not to any other. And I pray for that strength in each one of us. In Jesus' name we pray.